Hello, everyone. Just waiting for folks to continue. We'll give it a minute or so for everybody to log in, and then we can get started. This is Erica. Hey, it looks like everybody's in who is going to be in. So let's go ahead and get started. Hello again. My name is Erica Gunderson. I'm with WTTW News in Chicago, the local PBS station, and I'm honored to welcome you this afternoon to an event to relaunch the founding branch of WILPF US, the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom. Those who are new to what WILPF is and does should know that this is the world's oldest international women's peace and social justice organization. Today, WILPF has branches across the United States and in 30 countries around the world. WILPF maintains consultative status at the United Nations as a civil society co-founder of the UN. WILPF was founded by Jane Addams and many other international women at The Hague in 1915. 69 United States women left from Hull House in their hometowns, crossed the submarine mined Atlantic Ocean to try for a permanent end to future wars, including World War I, that current and growing conflict. They were referred to as the women in the big hats, and many old photos of that ocean crossing still exist. WILPF grew out of the settlement house model that Addams and others created at Hull House. They demonstrated remarkable mediation, peacemaking, and people skills, acting as good neighbors and working together with people in a part of Chicago that many Chicagoans shunned. Jane Addams lived and worked at Hull House for over 40 years. Her Nobel Peace Prize grew from what she learned right here in Chicago. Addams scholar Rima Lunin-Schultz will share some of those lessons with us and what relevance they still hold for our work with immigrants here and across the US. After we hear from our speakers, you'll also hear how you can help restart a Chicago chapter. But first, let me introduce Michael Childress, the president of the DuPage County NAACP, who will say a few words about Jane Addams' role in the founding of NAACP, a sister organization of WILPF. Mr. Childress, we extend a warm welcome to you.
Thank you so much. I need to make a quick correction. I'm the current vice president. I'm the former president of DuPage County NAACP.
Michael, could you turn your volume up just a bit?
Let me do that. Hang on a second. Is that better? Is that better?
It's a little better. If you can make it any higher, that'd be good.
That's as loud as my computer will go. Let me see if there's a space for the mic. See if they can turn the mic up.
Oh, you can talk loud.
Okay. Well, I will do that. Again, thank you for having me. I just wanted to make a quick correction there, is that I'm the current first vice president of the DuPage County and former president. I had to step aside. I didn't have to step aside, but I did in order to run for public office. So I am also the current vice chair of DuPage County Board of Supervisors in DuPage County right now. So I'm really happy to be here, and I'm really honored to be here. When I was asked to come, I was honored, and I had to go and scramble because I hadn't thought about Jane Addams since grade school when we learned about Hull House. So I had to go and refresh myself. What I've found was really kind of warmed my heart because, again, she is one of the co-founders of the NAACP. And I also love just researching history because I believe that history gives you the roadmap of where you want to go. So I always love to do research. And what I found is her first name is actually Laura Jane Addams, born in Cedarville, Illinois, and had this dream of going to Smith College, but her father wouldn't let her go because women weren't allowed to go to college at the time. So she ended up in Rockford Seminary. My daughter actually grew up in Rockford. She went to Rockford Seminary, who was concerned with the rigorous academics and moral development of its students. after about a year, she graduated as a valedictorian, and then a year later they changed the college to Rockford College, and she was actually granted her degree. So that was kind of a nice thing that she got what she wanted. Her father died, I guess, at some point and left her a lot of money, and she was doing a lot of volunteer work at nursing homes for elderly African American women and orphans for girls. Um, so they set her in motion and fueled her passion for being concerned for the needs of others. Chicago having a huge immigrant neighborhood that was just horribly filthy. We're living in unsanitary conditions where diseases were spread quite readily. Her and a friend, Ellen Gates Starr, which no one seems to talk about her at all, when they arrived in the city of Chicago, there was a mansion in the 19th Ward that in 19th Ward was significant because it had the city's highest death rate. And the mansion was built by Charles Hull in 1856, which is actually, I'm dating myself, which is actually 100 years before I was born. When the owners found out what the women were up to, he gave them the whole house free of charge, gave them the mansion free of charge. And that began the whole house settlement in 1889. She supported gender and racial equality, and that's when she became a founding member of the NAACP. And that our founding was in 1908. What I researched, I found that Teddy Roosevelt visited Hull House several times, and Hull House was operated until 1963, and when it was turned into Hull House Museum, so Jane Addams Hull House Museum. So I was really fascinated. I could probably research this young lady, over and over, and because as I started finding out more and more, I became more and more fascinated by her. But I won't bore you with that. I know I only have a couple minutes, but I just really wanted to let you know how excited I am to be a part of your organization. And I want to thank Gloria for inviting me in.
Thank you, Michael, for your encouragements. That was I love hearing all of that background. I mean, even those of us who know some of that maybe don't know all of that. And it's really good to hear all of that, as we go into this venture. So thank you again for your encouragement as WILPF restarts their Chicago branch. Rima Lennon-Schultz has contributed greatly to the world's understanding of the work of Jane Addams and of her as a person, a lot of what we just heard too. The president of Women's International League for Peace and Freedom US section is with us to present a special award of appreciation to Rima for her lifelong work. I'm pleased to introduce WILPF President Darian DeLu.
Thank you very much. It is my great pleasure to be able to speak with you all today to acknowledge the very valuable work that Rima has done by letting the world and letting WILPF members better understand the way that Jane Addams' work evolved. This is a very important contribution to our understanding of Jane Addams' work, especially today as we look at the situation of immigrants in the United States and the difficulties they're facing at a time which in some ways echoes the time of Jane Addams. So it's my great pleasure to acknowledge the good work of Rima and to
Chicago. Where is it?
I'm sorry, and to confirm that we offer her an award for her excellent work. Thank you.
Now, I think I am supposed to be the interviewer for Rima, and I will say thank you very much to our president of the U.S. section of WILPF, Darian DeLu, and I will be giving some questions to Rima. So can you all hear me? or at least, can you hear me, Rima?
Yes,
Okay,
yes, and can I just say thank you and
go ahead.
just very briefly before you ask the first question, I want to say thanks for this award. Um, I think as others have said today, the importance of history, of giving us a blueprint for the future, of giving us a usable past that we can understand where we've been, so we can begin to plan and work toward our goals for where we want to be, is so important. And the inclusion of groups that have struggled and continue to struggle to find their way into the American narrative, and not just the narrative, but literally to find their way into the American political tradition, and to make their opinions and their needs and their commitment to American democracy have meaning and really become full citizens, is something that Addams was deeply devoted to. So she would be happy to know that we're thinking about this, even as we struggle in a world that is in very bad shape right now. And I can't not say two words. I hope that people understand what they mean, but I'm simply going to say them: cease fire. And hope that that is understood. We are at a very precarious and difficult time as human beings on this planet. So with that, I thank you very much for caring about the work I've done as a historian, and let's get on with it. So go ahead, Gloria.
Rima, do you have the award available just so our viewers can see it?
Yes, I don't know. You see, the other thing is, I have to tell everybody, within the last year, I've lost my sight. So this is my premier engagement as a sightless historian, and my husband is helping me and Gloria is helping me. So I don't know if I'm putting this upside down or not, but this is the award, and it's very beautiful. It's crystal and it's very lovely. Okay.
Thank you.
All right.
All right, Rima, we're ready. We're going to do this.
Okay, good.
All right. So these questions are very good, I must tell you. And the first one is, how did Haymarket influence Addams' ideas about making peace? Go for it.
Okay, in 1935, when Addams was in her last year of life, and one of the things she was doing was writing a biography of a dear friend and one of her most close colleagues in the work she did at Hull House, and in terms of work with peace issues, a woman by the name of Julia C. Lathrop. She was writing her biography, and in that biography, she makes the point that when they were young and first began their work at Hull House, they did it under the cloud of the Haymarket, that the Haymarket was in their minds, in the minds of Chicago, for 10, 20 years after Haymarket had happened. And Haymarket had occurred in 1886, just 3 years before Jane Addams and Ellen Gates Starr, who I will talk about and bring her back into the picture, the co-founders of the Hull House Settlement House, began their work in Chicago. So Haymarket, what is Haymarket? I'm going to say that it was a peaceful meeting of workers, an evening meeting in a commercial area of Chicago where they had gathered May 4th, the day after two workers who were on strike in a protest at the McCormick Harvester plant in the neighborhood, demanding really that there be an 8-hour day because workers were working 60-hour weeks, 6 hours, 6 days a week for very little pay. And they wanted recognition of a union. They wanted collective bargaining. They wanted better conditions. And two of the workers were killed that day. They were murdered by thugs who were hired by the owners to break up the protest. And the workers were gathering at Haymarket, which was an open market area, not very far, walking distance from where Hull House Settlement House would be in 1889, just 3 years later. And they were gathered there to hear speeches, and they were quiet. They were not armed, and they were contemplating what was their next step. What were they going to do? They were part of a large 8-hour day movement all over the United States. And in this early May week of protests all over the United States, thousands of workers had come out to demand the 8-hour day legislation nationally. And in Chicago, between 60,000 and 80,000 workers in all different industries, not just at the McCormick plant, had been marching and protesting and participating. It was part of what was called the Great Upheaval. And it was an upheaval because this was one of the first great industrial conflicts between capital and labor that erupted in the New World at this time. And at the Haymarket, the group was about to disperse. And in fact, the mayor of the city at the time, Carter Harrison, had come to see the meeting. And he had determined that it was kind of quiet and nothing doing and nothing to worry about. And he had sort of left early to walk home. And he left, and all of a sudden, without provocation, a big brigade of police came and marched into the workers and basically attacked the workers. A bomb was exploded, a dynamite bomb. And that dynamite bomb resounded internationally. The world heard that bomb. And the repercussions of it were very, very significant. Okay, so I'm rounding up what Addams heard as she came to Chicago, because she wasn't there at the very time, but Julia Lathrop had been there and others, was that there was fear, there was confusion, there was disturbance about social unrest among the propertied classes, and there was a consternation. Would there be revolution? Would there be disorder? Was there a way for the different groups in society to meet together, to talk together? And she began to understand that there were certain people in the community, some enlightened figures, including a man by the name of Lyman J. Gage, who was one of the founders of something that was called the Civic Foundation and Civic Federation. And he had begun to have conversations with labor leaders and businessmen. And Addams realized that one of the possibilities for making any kind of conflict resolution might come in talking, in having people talk with one another. Okay, That was what you learned from
Yeah.
Haymarket.
That's a good summary of Haymarket, and we really appreciate it. That's a good lead off. So now you have given me a second question, and that is, how did Addams mediate race conflict with her immigrant neighbors?
Okay, well, that brings us to something that was much harder to crack, and I guess I want to put this under the rubric of the business, the unfinished business, and I think we can even say to this day, the unfinished business of Reconstruction, and it reminds us that not only was Haymarket with the labor capital conflict in the air and hanging over all of what people were thinking about how the society was going to operate in this new industrial world of ours. There was, of course, the fact that while Lincoln had emancipated the slaves and had opened the door for the freedmen to come and to join in the citizenship of the nation, much had to be done to make this effective. And Addams was very aware of the push and pull of that unfulfilled promise. And in Chicago, in the beginning, in the 1890s, when the population of African Americans was relatively small, Addams was keenly interested in working with the leadership. And so she was someone who knew and worked with Ida B. Wells Barnett, Fannie Barrier Williams, and and she was, by the way, interested in the work of W.E.B. Du Bois, who was also one of the people who was part of the 1908 movement for the NAACP, and so on. But she realized that what she needed to do to make her immigrant neighbors accept their Black neighbors was for Americans to accept their Black neighbors, because what she found, ironically, was that her immigrant neighbors had come initially without race prejudice. What they learned was race prejudice in becoming Americanized. And one of the things that Addams was doing was not just introducing the immigrants to Americans who did not come and participate in the industrial districts where she began to live and did not know about the important cultural contributions that immigrants were making. She needed to make that part of the equation important and to explain how much immigrant gifts and contributions of a cultural nature were important. But she also had to keep immigrants free of the prejudice and biases and anti-democratic aspects of American of the American racism that was creeping and growing. And as early as 1903, she began to sense that there was a nullification of the Emancipation Proclamation, and it disturbed her. And this continued, and in fact, she began to give speeches and write about this. And so her way of handling this was to model a kind of interracialism at Hull House without coercion, because people wanted to be with their own groups. And that seemed to be the natural thing that was going on as immigrants were for linguistic reasons and so forth, participating with people who came from their own homelands. But what she did was she created a situation where people like Du Bois and Ida B. Wells, Barnett, and others, and in fact the colored women's clubs, as they were called, they were invited to be with Jane Addams and to participate at Hull House. They gave lectures at Hull House. They lectured to the white women in the Hull House Women's Club. They were respected. They were shown to be intellectually and culturally the equals of Addams and the Hull House residents. And so in that way, she was modeling a different approach, a kind of a cultural acceptance in a Jim Crow world. She was not perfect, and she could not escape the Jim Crow world, but she was making steps in the direction of dislodging it. And we can talk more about it, and I really wish we had time to do so, but that's what she was trying to do.
Thank you, Rima. That's very informative. And our third question is, what was Addams' strategy to deal with labor conflict?
Okay. I think that the importance of collective bargaining became very, very clear to Addams almost immediately. She was influenced by labor leaders who became important allies of hers right away. I must say that one of the things that I am doing here is to introduce a sort of different Jane Addams than we normally talk about. We normally think about her as, you know, a Saint Jane, or the woman who was basically working only with women, who was a kindly a maternalist type, a pacifist, and so forth. And I want to talk to you about the political figure that Jane Addams was, the incredibly smart political strategist who worked with men and women, who was basically able to work in the city trenches, as I call it, and who was interested in what was happening, you know, on the ground. And I think that her instincts were to be part of that neighborhood that she had moved into, which was the major industrial manufacturing neighborhood in the city of Chicago. And the city of Chicago was a major industrial city by the late 1890s. It was a city that grew exponentially. In 1890, there were 1 million people in the city. In 1900, there were 2 million people in the city. 3/4 of them were immigrants. And they were living, most of the immigrants in her neighborhood were living close to where they worked. And so what she found herself and Ellen Starr found themselves in was a neighborhood where they were interested in bringing art and music and theater and whatnot to the people in the neighborhood and being neighborly. What they found out was they were living in a neighborhood that was a major garment industry neighborhood, and they were involved almost immediately in a series of strikes with the clothing workers. And before she knew it, she began to advocate for the use of arbitration, to support collective bargaining, and to support trade unions and the organization of trade unions and their acceptance by the employers. And I think that her experience in 1894 through the Civic Federation, where she was had the opportunity to attempt to encourage George Pullman and his managers to accept collective bargaining with the railway workers and the workers in his factories at Pullman to do arbitration and collective bargaining. And he refused, and his managers refused to talk to any of the union people. Was a searing experience on her part. She realized that there could be no ability to solve industrial problems without some kind of collective bargaining. So her entire efforts, and they were, and she used a variety of strategies, labor legislation, literally supporting the strikers by engaging with them. Ellen Gates Starr was one of the people who went out on the picket lines, fundraising for striking workers when they needed to stay out of the and keep themselves on strike, and raising money to bail them out when they were jailed for disorderly conduct, including Ellen Gates Starr, who was jailed for disorderly conduct when she joined a picket line. And so forth. So there were many ways that Addams became involved, and she became involved through the simple fact that she was living and breathing the air and walking the streets and understanding the plight of the people who were her neighbors. And while she traveled a lot, and while she was wealthy enough to be able to get away and vacation in some nice places, and she had choices that the neighbors didn't have.
Justice.
She was deeply interested in the issues of social justice. And what she began to realize and link together was that there could be no peace in industrial relations without justice. And no justice, no peace was a refrain that began to extend beyond the neighborhood to the state, to the nation, to the world. And this notion that you could not have a reconciliation or an arbitration that settled differences in a nonviolent way without attending to the issues of social justice was one of her great contributions to a new understanding of what making peace actually entailed. And so she really redefined the whole idea of what peacemaking was all about.
Okay, are we ready for our number 4 question?
Oh, I hope so.
All right. Well, Mary Beth asked if we can tie this in as well with immigrants, a little bit more integrating the workers with the immigrants. So my 4th question is, what did Addams learn from labor strikes, and especially in terms of immigrant relations?
You already answered the question.
Well, I'm going to answer it more fully. Between 1910 and 1922, there were a long series of clothing worker strikes, which ultimately led to the amalgamated clothing workers being able to get collective bargaining in all the manufacturing facilities in Chicago, but also in other parts of the United States. And that was a great achievement in terms of industrial relations. The people who were the workers were mostly immigrants. and many of them were actually teenage girls. If any of you know about the terrible conditions in New York with the tenement strikes, the tenement anti-sweatshop crusade. The anti-sweatshop crusade was also very important in Chicago. And the people who were most affected by the sweatshop trade were immigrants, and some of them were the most recent immigrants who had landed in Chicago and were living in very bad conditions near Hull House. And it was the work of Florence Kelly and Julia Lathrop and a woman by the name of Alzina Stevens, who were residents with Jane Addams and Ellen Gates Starr at Hull House, who began to develop information and data that led to the first factory inspection act that was passed in 1893, when Governor John Peter Altgeld, himself an immigrant, a German-American, was governor of Illinois, and he was a great progressive. And he was interested in what Florence Kelly had learned in Germany when she had studied there after graduating from Cornell in the United States, and she wanted to further graduate degrees, and she went to Zurich, Switzerland, and then Germany, and she began to learn about Marxism and socialism. She became a socialist. She worked with Frederick Engels, translating one of Frederick Engels' important books about the English working class, and she learned about studying the raw data of wages and hours and really understanding the plight of the workers. And so Hull House Maps and Papers, which is an extraordinary volume that the residents of Hull House published in 1895, is really one of the first books that details the conditions of American immigrants in Chicago, with maps of the nationalities of the people who were living in the neighborhood and their wages, and also with chapters that describe in great detail the sweating system, the ways in which people are working in actually taking piecework home with them, children and women working, and for very, very small amounts of money, long hours, and they need to be organized. So what Addams learned, however, was how good the immigrants were at being their own missionaries, so to speak. When I say this, I mean how well they were at organizing themselves, of even these teenage girls like Bessie Abramowitz, who becomes the wife of Sidney Hillman, who becomes the president of the Amalgamated Clothing Workers. She learned that the immigrants were people who could live together across different ethnic lines, that they were able to form solidarity because they worked together and they lived in proximity with each other. People who did not get along in Europe were getting along in the neighborhood. Well, not all the time, but enough for her to get a glimmer of what a kind of democratic cosmopolitanism might consist of. And in this, she was buoyed in her hope for a kind of a new patriotism and a new internationalism that could transcend what was going on in American neighborhoods and really be something that we could export to the world, and that this would be part of what peacemaking would mean on a global level.
Okay, could I don't want to rush you, but I'm trying to stick with our little timetable here.
Yes.
Okay, what the broader implications of the Chicago story? I have another question, your final question, and could you tie it together with, immigrants, the resistance today and the resistance then against immigrants, and, the whole issue of immigration? And Jane Addams, of course, is known for that. But what are the broader implications of the Chicago story?
Addams realized that part of her work had to be in what I would call civil liberties work. She had to become adept at not just the NAACP, but the Immigrants Protective League, which was established the same year as the NAACP. And later, she was one of the founders of the ACLU, the American Civil Liberties Union. The Immigrants Protective League was really an ACLU for immigration, and its major place was Chicago, and this was her ideas of how to protect and essentially expand democracy by what she would say would be solving the dilemmas that occurred by using more democracy, meant that you had to really create a society where there wasn't such a thing as an alien not having the same rights as a citizen. So she would say that anyone who is living in our country should be treated as citizens are treated. They should be given the rule of law. They should have adequate services. They should not be treated as second-class anything. And so the whole idea of undocumented people being treated in a completely different way and being deported and families being separated and so forth was absolutely antagonistic to the ideas that Addams had. She even felt that dual citizenship was a good thing. She believed that we needed to work on having American democracy fully embrace what the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence really said. And when we did that, the dissenters, the people who were anarchists, the people who were here and were fomenting politics of a radical kind and so forth, would learn how to live with us simply because we were functioning as a real democracy. So that was the way she saw the immigrant. The immigrant to her was effectively a good citizen on their face value. They were, she said, like the pioneers were. They've come here because they have something to contribute and they have the energy to give to our society. So she looked at immigrants as being valuable for the American future. And she opposed the quota system that was established between 1917 and 1925. She opposed the anti-immigration forces, and she was interested in protecting migrants, both from the southern United States and from Mexico, and did so. And she went to bat for them. And I think that this, and wrote about the relationship that social settlements should have to the social unrest in cities. So right now, what would she say to us? She would say to us that we need very much to show the people who are coming here as refugees from places where they are being oppressed, and where they are having hard times. We have to show them our hospitality. We have to show them what democracy really means, and that they must be offered the chance to be citizens here. And she would be very opposed to the kind of system we have right now, which is really delaying decisions about human beings, about families, and making it very difficult to achieve permanent citizenship and to achieve a kind of security.
Rima?
So, yes, so that would be her approach. Yes.
Okay, well, as it's, we don't want to, go on too long because of, the realities of audienship. But this has been a marvelous talk, and I think you've given a window to the world, WTTW plug. You've given a window to Jane Addams, and also how immigrants are connected to the whole picture of peacemaking globally and peacemaking locally, because Chicago is experiencing some upheavals at the moment, which can be gone into at a later time. And so we want to all give you a round of applause and congratulations on your great award. And I guess it's time to turn it over to our MC, Erica.
Terrific.
Thank you again, Rima. That was so interesting. I just enjoyed that so much. There's so much that's still relevant today. It's just fascinating. So thank you again. So next I would like, before I say that, there will be another virtual event in February. Information will be coming about that soon. WILPF has invited legal historian and professor Felice Batlan about the Chicago Immigrant Protection League that started Hull House and its relevance to the current immigration crisis in Chicago, which we touched on some today. Again, that'll be in February, so you can look out for information on that soon. And next, I'd like to introduce WILPF's current interim membership chair, Shilpa Pandey. Shilpa first encountered WILPF in her native India, where she helped organize branches and progressive women leaders. In the US, Shilpa now co-coordinates the UN Practicum for Advocacy, which offers a unique opportunity to participate in the Commission on the Status of Women events each spring in New York City and at the UN. Shilpa, please tell us what this event is about and how folks can apply.
Thank you, Erica. And of course, listening to Rima, I'm just reminded that as a first generation American, as an immigrant myself, it was such a pleasure listening and learning more about our own history and how Jane Addams, contributed to the whole immigration rights and the situation that we are in today. Thank you so much, Rima, for bringing light to that part of Jane Addams' work. And I wanted to talk a little bit about what WILPF does today. And for the last 108 years, our organization, Women's International League for Peace and Freedom, is the longest, oldest, continually run organization by women. And many of you may be aware that our work helped develop the Universal Declaration on Human Rights 75 years ago and the Geneva Convention. We participated in efforts to create the League of Nations and then the United Nations, where we still enjoy a consultative status as a recognized member of the civil society. Since the 1950s, WILF has vigorously and tirelessly opposed the creation, testing, trade, and proliferation of nuclear weapons and other weapons which threaten the survival of the planet and whose use represent war crimes. We were involved in the campaign to disable landmines, the campaign against cluster bombs, chemical weapons, and today we protest against the use of drones and automatic robotic weapons. We are part of the No to NATO movement, and we insist that peace negotiations must immediately replace hostilities and violence in Palestine and Ukraine. So just want to give you a brief highlight of what all we do today through our issue committees and their projects, including Earth Democracy Committee. They work on environment, climate, and water quality protection. Our Advancing Human Rights Committee that works on migration issues, repatriations, and ending mass incarceration. The Cuba and Bolivarian Alliance Committee that works on restoring normal relations with Cuba and ending punishing economic sanctions there. The Disarm/End Wars Committee. The Domestic Prisoners of War Committee, which focuses on addressing the legal, economic, and personal effects of domestic violence. The Middle East Peace, Justice, and Action Committee. And last but not the least, the Women, Money, and Democracy Committee, which focuses on economic justice issues, especially as they affect women, families, and democracy. I also wanted to let everybody know that membership in WILPF US is just $35 annually, and it does include membership in WILPF International. So you will be joining an international sisterhood of peace women and can become as engaged as you like, learning and leading along with women of all ages, races, and backgrounds. You can join us. I'm going to put the link there at www.wilpfus.org/join. I will soon put in the link in the chat as soon as I'm complete giving this introduction to WILPF. We are particularly interested in recruiting members here in Chicago, where our first branch began. And we know some of the local issues that need attention and activism, and local progressive women in WILPF, and can certainly lead on those issues and organize successfully. So please, I would encourage you to contact me at membershipchair@wilpfus.org to learn more. Again, the email ID will be in chat shortly. If you cannot join but want to support us, please consider donating us. And then finally, I want to take thank you, Mary Beth, for putting in the email address. I wanted to just take a few minutes and introduce our very special program. It's called the UN Practicum in Advocacy and our Local to Global programs. Both of these programs bring together a cohort of women to the United Nations Commission on the Status of Women event each year in March for a week of networking, learning together, and leadership preparation. And I would encourage you to please reach out to myself for more information on those programs. And again, encourage younger women who might be studying in universities, colleges, or who might be working in nonprofits and are interested in building a career in feminist peace building process. I think this program is extremely relevant for them to participate in. And that is all I had to talk about. Thank you.
Thank you, Shilpa. So now we're all up to speed on WILPF and everything that it does, as well as the work of Jane Addams. So this has been a pretty fruitful hour, I would say. So thank you again to our featured speaker, Dr. Schultz, as well as our other honored guests today. And One more reminder about the next virtual event featuring legal historian and professor Felice Batlan, who will talk about the Chicago Immigrant Protection League that started Hull House and its relevance to the current immigration crisis in Chicago. That will be, and I have the exact date for you now, February 24th at 2 p.m. And everybody who registered for the event today will get the information for that as well. If you are interested in becoming a new WILPF Chicago member, bringing it home to Chicago, email membershipchair@WILPF, that's WILPFUS.org. That'll be in the chat as well. Special thanks to our Chicago WILPF Restart team and allies, including Kate Skagg and the Chicago American Association of University Women, the Chicago League of Women Voters, Chicago Alderman Chico and Conway, WILPF members Gloria McMillan, Shilpa Pandey, Mary Beth Gardam, Philip Cole, and Section President Darian DeLue. There's so much work to do to help us rise up together as progressive women organizers in Chicago and around the world. I'm Erica Gunderson in Sisterhood and Peace. Thanks again for being with us today.